we thought maybe Billy Napier was probably having to knock back some of these vitamin energy drinks as he was trying to figure out what he was going to do with his coaching staff situation. And look, the timing of this was not great, right? You're about a week away from spring ball. You lose your defensive coordinator. You lose your wide receivers coach. You lose your tight ends coach, guys that have been with you, that you have history with. And now, obviously, the timing of this with spring ball getting ready to start, you're not able to really go out and have a lot of candidates that you can pick from and have to interview. So I think Billy was in a really tough spot going into this, but considering the outcomes now and the results that we have, I think in some ways this really worked out as well as it could have given the circumstances, right? First of all, I think that it's clear with this that Billy moves in silence, Nick, and he was very meticulous about how he went in hiring these coaches and going about the interview process and trying to get guys in place so that they could be here for spring practice. Now, obviously, it seemed like the Austin Armstrong hire was made and basically done before the Patrick Toney news was even out there, right? I mean, like, it got out that Toney was leaving, and it immediately Matt Zenitz reported at On3 that Armstrong was going to be coming over. Really weren't a lot of like obvious candidates out there for a tight ends coach, and we wondered kind of when that position might get filled, and then just boom, one day Russ Callaway gets promoted. And I think that was obviously clearly something that Billy had probably identified once he knew that Peagler was moving on, that was a hire to make. And then
really, if you looked at Gators Online, we had only had two names out there, and one was Russ Callaway, and then the other was Ty Darlington, who was at Florida as a quality control assistant working with Peagler and the tight ends, and people were like, "Why isn't there a tight ends board?" And I'm like, "There is. It's 50-50, one of the two. It's one of these two."
Well, and then they had a huge wide receiver coaching board, right? I mean, you had
more than 12 people interviewed.
Yeah, I mean, you had guys on staff that potentially could have been promoted. You had former Gators out there like Ike Hilliard, Dallas Baker. You had candidates that we knew of that had been looked at, former Colorado wide receivers coach. And then seemingly out of left field, here comes Billy Gonzalez. And I think that folks had maybe started to wonder, is Billy Napier even going to make a hire at receiver by the time, camp is done? Like, could he just go through all of spring ball and have Decker coaching that position, which I think he could have. But there wasn't really any movement. And then all of a sudden, boom, he basically plucks Billy away from Marshall as they're starting their spring ball. So I just think the way that he went about these hires, there weren't a lot of leaks, and again, he didn't have a lot of time to work with and a lot of parameters to work within. But I think all things considered, I mean, about 2 weeks ago, he was looking for 3 coaches, and now 2 weeks later, his staff is complete.
Very complete. And to me, I think Austin Armstrong, the players love him. I mean, carrying him around, that Princely Umemelan's tweet had me dying, had me laughing. A lot of energy. I think the biggest thing from talking to people who have been at practice is the different level of energy that Armstrong and Toney brought to practice. And there's not saying that one's right or one's wrong. Toney was head down, working with the safeties. And I think the benefit, which I thought was kind of weird to begin with, of why doesn't the defensive coordinator have a position room? This will be my 11th season covering Florida, and they've always had a position room on top of being the defensive coordinator. Heck, Will Muschamp was the defensive coordinator, the head coach, and worked with the safeties. Shout out to Des Watson, and I think that's maybe Jalen Humphreys. I can't really tell, can't see the number, but shout out to Big Des. Hey, not much you can do. If Des Watson wants to pick you up, there's not much you can say about that. But I think the benefit of not having a position group is Austin Armstrong is able to kind of float around. He works with the safeties, touches the linebackers, is over by the defensive line. And I think that really gives you a complete picture as a defensive coordinator. You're not just solely focused on one position group, and you kind of get to see a little bit of everything at practice. So I think that's a big thing. I'm going to be hesitant and to see what he does in the SEC. Someone made an argument, well, he's going to need to pick it up because these are real SEC teams. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, this isn't the Sun Belt. I'm like, yeah, it's cool. He also doesn't have Sun Belt talent that he's coaching. So it's not apples to apples. If you're saying it's apples to apples, it's not. I will be cautious because he's young and hasn't been on a stage like this. So there's going to be give and take, and you might have some growing pains. I don't know. I like the hire as far. He certainly won the press conference. Who doesn't? And then I think Russ Callaway, to me, and get your opinion on this too, Zach. How much coaching are you doing at tight ends? Like, was Tim Brewster one of the best tight end coaches because he got the most out of his players? Like, did he make Antonio Gates? Certainly not. Did he make Kyle Pitts? Certainly not. Tim Brewster was a savage on the recruiting trail. And I think that's what you need at a tight end position. My biggest thing for Russ Callaway is what can you do, whether it's getting guys into your room or just getting guys into other rooms. You need to be, if you're the tight end coach, I think you need to be a dog on the recruiting trail. That's what I want to see from Russ. In the 15 minutes that we're out there, the tight ends or spend half their time with the offensive line and working on blocking drills to build that chemistry. So pass them off. Make sure during that segment, talk to the recruits that are on the field.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, look, I think for Russ Callaway, you look at his background and the work that he's done as a coach specifically. Yeah, but on the offensive side of the ball, like he's been an offensive coordinator. Obviously, he's coached receivers, he's coached quarterbacks. He was a quarterback himself, so I think naturally being able to transition to that tight end position is going to be pretty seamless for him. He's already probably had some work there, but to your point, Nick, that is a spot where there is maybe more of an emphasis on recruiting than other position coaches. And I think that certainly his personality and the fact that he is a younger guy, it should bode well for that. I think he's maybe will do, a little bit even better of a job than William Peagler in that respect. But one thing that I really think that was fortunate for Billy Napier with these hires is the continuity that he's been able to keep with these coaches, because obviously when you're putting together a staff and when you're trying to go out there and win, you want guys that have been in the trenches with you, that either you've worked with before, people on your staff have worked with before, or at the very least guys that either know your system and kind of know came up under the same coaching tree, or maybe they've worked at the school before, and so that they have some history there, right? But by losing Patrick Toney, by losing Kerry Colbert, by losing William Peagler, Billy lost some guys that knew him, knew his program, knew his system, knew his expectations. And so not just the timing of this was tough, but I think the value that those guys brought in their familiarity with Napier's program. And you weren't necessarily just going to go out and easily find that and replace that. And I think if you would have lost some of that familiarity, it could have had an impact and, could have taken away from what you previously had as a staff. So the fact that with each of the three coaches, he's able to get some semblance of that, right? You promote Russ Callaway from within. So he's been within your program for the first season. He's also worked with guys on your staff before at within the New York Giants. He was there with Spencer and Rob Sale. He was also at Alabama, was also at LSU. So he's been in this system. He understands the language and the terminology and all that. And then obviously he's been within the program. So you promote him, you put a guy there now coaching the tight ends that the players know, that they've seen, that they're familiar with. He's going to be able to coach and kind of speak the same language on offense. So you get that in Callaway. You go over to the defensive side of the ball, and you bring Austin Armstrong over, who obviously has not coached with you at Florida, has not worked with these players, but he came up under Patrick Toney and he came up under Billy Napier at Louisiana. Mm-hmm. So he knows that defense. We've already heard from the players basically this week that it's basically the same scheme. He's kind of putting his spin on it, but as Jason Marshall said, it's like we're all basically fluent in the same language. We're not having to learn basically a whole bunch of new terminology. So
no, there's that. They don't need Rosetta Stone, Zach.
No, they don't. No, they don't. This is kind of honestly, you kind of lucked into this in many ways. So you get that familiarity. And then last but not least, you hire Billy Gonzalez, who was just here a year ago and has worked with the majority in this room already. And obviously knows Florida probably better than anybody on the staff, save for Mike Peterson. So when you look at it from that standpoint, I think Billy checks some boxes there that I think is going to be beneficial for him, especially given the circumstances of these coaching changes and the timing of it.
Yeah, I think I really like the Billy G hire. I like cautiously optimistic about Armstrong and like I said with Russ, like show me something on the recruiting trail. Not that he hasn't or can't, but I'm waiting to see it.
He'll have to.
This is a huge time for getting guys on campus, and Corey Bender's been all over. Corey Bender and Donovan Kaiser. Shout out to Don 3.
Corporate Don.